The United Kingdom cannot ignore calls for slavery reparations, says a leading US judge. We're going to read into this more from this exclusive from The Guardian, guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an exclusive from The Guardian with the headline that the UK cannot ignore calls for slavery reparations, says a leading UN judge. I apologise if I can't say that word properly. I'm trying to say it properly, but I can't. This is an interesting one, that's for sure. So, the exclusive, Patrick Robertson says a reparations for transatlantic slavery is required by history and is required by law. So let's read into it, guys, to get a better understanding. So a leading judge at the International Court of Justice has said that the UK will no longer be able to ignore the growing calls for reparations for transatlantic slavery. Judge Patrick Robertson, who presides over the trial of the former Yugoslav President Slobodan Milošević, said the international tide on slavery reparations was quickly shifting and urged the UK to change its current position on the issue. He says, "They cannot continue to ignore the greatest atrocity, significantly man's inhumanity to man. They cannot continue to ignore it. Reparations have been paid for other wrongs and obviously far more quickly, far more speedily than reparations from what I consider the greatest atrocities and crimes in the history of mankind. Transatlantic chattel slavery," Robertson said. "I believe that the United Kingdom will not be able to resist this movement towards the payment of reparation. It is required by history and required by law." Robertson spoke exclusively to The Guardian ahead of UCO Day for remembering the transatlantic slave trade and abolition. He is scheduled to make a keynote address on Wednesday at the London Mayor's office to mark the day. The event follows the key roles that Robertson played in writing and compelling the Battle Group report on reparations for transatlantic chattel slavery, which was published in June. The report, which has been described as a most comprehensive state-to-state reparation analysis, identifies the reparations that are due in respect of 31 countries in which transatlantic slavery was practiced. The British Empire, as you guys know, was one of the biggest slave atrocities out there given our history. It's important to remember, for all the things, for as grand as the empire was for Britain, we were a horrible nation. We were a horrible empire. We were very ruthless, and slavery was very much deep into it. Yes, of course, things changed and all that jazz, but it doesn't mean to say that Britain needs to remember what it's responsible for, the damage that it has caused back in its history, and those wounds have not gone away. The wounds are still there, and you need to sow those seeds and accept what's happened, learn from your mistakes and move on. The greatest nation that has learnt from its mistake more than anything has been Germany. And we know from Germany's history, and they have learnt a great deal about themselves and reflected on themselves since those tragic World War II days. And they have learnt from that, took that on board, and they have changed so much as a nation since then. Such a contrast then to now. But they accepted what they did, accepted what was wrong, took their punishment, and rightfully so. And they've embedded that history of reminding it to their generations and next generations of what they have done, so that their generations of German children that come in through that country know about the mistakes that they have done, so that they can learn from those mistakes. And I don't know about you, but I think it's about time that the British start learning from their mistakes, and that is done the exact same way, that we accept our responsibilities as a nation, and that we teach that to our kids, that what we did back then was wrong, and for our generation to know that, to not know that what we did was wrong, it's not okay, and like everybody else, you have to accept your responsibilities. You can't advocate from them. You can't hide what you've done in your past. It's always there. And Britain will have to pay that price at some point. They can ignore it all they want, but it's not going to go away. Whether it's this generation, this year, next year, 10 years, it's never going to go away. Because as long as there is no acceptance of what has happened, passed on within our history, this will never be stopped talking about, for all the wrong reasons. The event follows a key role that Robinson played in writing and compiling the Brattle Group report of Reparations for transatlantic chattel slavery, which was published in June. The report, which has been described as the most comprehensive state-to-state representation and analysis, identifies the representations that are due in respect of 31 countries in which transatlantic slavery was practiced. The study estimates that trillions of dollars are owed in reparation to countries affected by the transatlantic slavery. The report, which was published by the University of West Indies after a symposium held by the American Society of International Law, concludes that the UK alone is required to pay a sum of 24 trillion. That is $18.8 trillion pounds, as reparation for transatlantic slavery in 14 countries. Of that sum, about 9.6 trillion is due to Jamaica. The report uses calculations made by the Brattle Group, which factors in the wealth and GDP amassed by countries that enslaved African people. Britain is greatly responsible for a lot of damage done on the continent of Africa. Yes, France, Belgium and other European nations have their responsibilities too, but Britain has caused a great deal of atrocities there. When asked if the high figure comes as a surprise, Robinson said no. These calculations are not over a period of 5 or 10 years. They cover the entire duration of the transatlantic chattel slavery, which means they cover hundreds of years. What is more, reparations have never been paid. The calculations begin from day one of transatlantic chattel slavery. That is hundreds of years. And that alone explains the high figures. To address the figures, Robinson said the report proposed that payments be made over a longer period of time, between 10 and 25 years, rather than instantly. Well, Britain would go bankrupt if they were to pay that sum, which they're not going to. At the launch of the report of the University of West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, a former Prime Minister of Jamaica, reportedly said that reparation was owed to Jamaica and other countries affected by transatlantic slavery, and would not rule out bringing the issue to courts. On achieving reparation through international courts, Robinson said, "It's possible, but frankly I think the greater probability is for a resettlement on a political diplomatic basis, which takes into account the relevant legal considerations. But I don't rule out court proceedings." In April, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak refused to apologise for the UK's role in the slave trade or to commit to paying reparation. Of course he's not going to take ownership for it. But at some point, a UK Prime Minister is going to have to, at some point. Robinson said, "I have the highest regard for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, but I believe the stance that he has taken is regrettable and very much hope that he will reconsider it. The tide is changing, the political tide, the global tide is moving. The United Kingdom, including both principal parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party and other parties, which are just as important, need to take into account that movement is a movement in favour of reparation. The transatlantic child slavery is the greatest atrocity in the history of humankind, without parallel for its brutality, without parallel for its length of over 400 years, without parallel for its profitability." Robinson was born in Sheffield, Jamaica in 1994. After graduating from university, he worked as a prosecutor in Jamaica. He worked briefly at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and for 26 years in the Attorney General's Department. "I was responsible for advising the government on international law matters. I became a member of the International Law Commission. I became a member of the Inter-America Commission on Human Rights and its president. I became a member and president of the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, and actually presided over the trial of Slobodan Milošević, then in 2015. I was elected to the International Court of Justice." He said that everything he did in his life has been inspired by his father, who was a head teacher of an elementary school in Jamaica. "My father's matria that was the cane cutter's child deserves the same educational opportunities as the child of the butcher, who is the overseer. He added, I spent a great sense of deficit in relation to the public service that my father gave, and this endeavour I have been involved for that past 4 years is really an attempt on my part to try and reduce that deficit. I see it as a kind of service for the descendants of the enslaved, not only in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but whenever transatlantic chattel slavery was carried out. In terms of the let's take a step back a second, guys. Let's first of all talk about the amount of money that he's talking about here. I cannot see that money ever being paid back. We're talking about money that's far beyond the levels. You know, when we talk about that kind of level of money, that's something that America could potentially pay, but I can't see the United Kingdom paying that back. I really can't. I think it's way too much money. I'd like to say that I don't think money does not solve the issue. It should maybe be more about the acceptance. Yes, there should be a cost, but I don't think it should be that much money, guys. In all seriousness, I really don't. I think it's an unrealistic amount of money to ask the United Kingdom to pay. I'm being deadly serious. It's way too much money. But I do agree that the UK needs to accept its responsibilities for its past and try to make amends for those past. That I do accept. And should there be a cost to it? Yes. But I'm sorry, but not on that kind of level money. You are literally going to bankrupt the United Kingdom for that kind of money. And I'm sorry, I just can't see that happening. Why should my generation or the next generation be thrown into poverty for mistakes of previous generations? Answer me that. Because I don't think that my children's or my children's children should have to suffer because of mistakes by previous generations to pay a debt of that size, or a sum that you guys believe to be right. I do believe the UK should pay something back. I'm not debating that, but I certainly am debating that figure. I think that's incredibly ridiculous amount of money. To say that it can be paid within 10 to 25 years, no. If you're deadly serious about that kind of money, we're talking at least a good 50, 100 years before you even get that money, to get that kind of money from the government, from the United Kingdom. If there even will be a United Kingdom within the next 50 to 100 years, which I don't think will be the case. That's my realistic point of view, guys. But I certainly do agree that the UK needs to pay for its mistakes. That is one thing that I'm sure you and everyone in the comments will agree with me. But I'm not going to be surprised if some people would disagree with me on the sum. But that's what we're here for. We're here to learn, understand these things, and try to debate these things and what we think is the best way forward, guys. Because as a society, as a species, we want to better ourselves. And the United Kingdom will not better itself unless it accepts its past and the mistakes that it has made. But what do you guys think? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this one, because this one is really interesting. We're talking a lot of money, and we're talking about a lot of mistakes that the United Kingdom, the British Empire, needs to make up for. So you let me know down in the comments below what you guys honestly think. I'm sure some of you have much better history than I do on this as well, so I'm eager to hear what your thoughts are. Should the UK pay such a lump sum of money are we talking about here? If they should, how should they pay it? Because my generation and my future generations should not have to suffer as a result of previous generations, in my opinion. Like, share and subscribe as always. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.